in life. The most important thing is to have our hearts directed and attuned to Thee. Amen. Christ is risen.
Indeed, he is risen.
Indeed, he is risen. Thank you, Father. Thank you. It's a beautiful introductory, and as he said, she published a lot of books. I know, like 10 of them. And thank you for joining us, Frederica.
Yes.
And now the floor is for you. And please, Lady Angela and Kelly, unmute everyone, and including me and everyone. Thank you, and enjoy the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rula. Thank you. I'm so glad. Before, so we're all learning as we go along. And I've got a kind of, oh, wait a minute. It says I am muted. Am I muted?
No, you're,
yes.
No, you're not.
I'm not. Okay. All right. I have a talk based on an essay that I wrote for a book. I hope you've seen this book. It's by David and Mary Ford, who are at St. Tikhon Seminary. And it's about marriage. It's about Orthodox marriage. It's called Glory and Honor. Orthodox Christian Resources on Marriage is the title. And they asked me to write an essay for it. So that's what I'm going to read. It's about marriage. And I suppose perhaps not all of us have husbands at the moment, but it's such an intrinsic part of womanhood to be paired in that way that I think we can all identify with it. We know that's part of our womanly calling. So I'll do this. I was also thinking something that's a little strange for me is not hearing audience feedback. I understand the need for the muting. Maybe we could experiment with unmuting. I don't think, if your dog starts barking, turn it off. But it would depend on if it's quiet enough in the background where you are. But I'm used to, I say something funny and I hear people laugh. And now it's going to be, I say something I hope is funny and it'll be dead silence. So as I said, this is new for me and we'll see how it goes. But thank you for inviting me. My essay begins, like elementary school students. Writers are regularly asked to supply an essay to fit an assigned title. They give you the title, you write the essay. When I heard that the title of the essay I was supposed to write was The High and Holy Calling of Being a Wife. The High and Holy Calling of Being a Wife. When I heard that was the title I'd been assigned, I did what any sensible person would do. I tried to get out of it. My husband and I celebrated, or will celebrate, our 46th anniversary next month. So I have a lot of experience in being a wife, but whatever I've learned, whatever I've been doing around here for the last several decades, high and holy are not the adjectives that would immediately spring to mind. For most of us, married life is something we're making up as we go along. We learn some deep truths along the way, but usually immediately after, it would have been really useful to know that deep truth. Whatever height or holiness might have resulted would be entirely the Lord's doing and not our own. But that is true of everything we undertake, isn't it? We don't know what we're doing a lot of the time. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know whether what we just said or did was the right thing to say or do. And yet, God's grace keeps emerging, sometimes at the most unexpected places. My sweetheart and I got married May 18th, 1974. We were married out in the woods under a big oak tree. The wedding party, when we processed in up to the tree, included a black Labrador retriever with a red bandana around his neck. We processed through. Unmute me? Thank you. All of our hippie friends were on one side of the clearing and our very puzzled family members on the other side. We reached the tree and we turned around and we recited a line from, or a little poem from Leonard Cohen's novel, Beautiful Losers. God is alive, magic is afoot. So we read that aloud to begin our wedding ceremony. We weren't Christians then. We had asked our friend who was an Episcopal priest if he would do the wedding for us. And we told him, well, we'll be writing our own vows, so we'll bring you the service we'd like to use. And he said, no, actually, I can't do the service unless you use one of the Episcopal prayer book services. But there's some new experimental services. Maybe you'll find something you'll like. So we did that. We selected the very coolest of the options from the experimental services. And we weren't really Christians then. We would be better described as syncretists. That is, somebody who believes that all religions are true. They are all headed toward the same God. All the different roads lead up to the top of the mountain. And we didn't really think Christianity was a very profound religion. We thought that the Eastern religions were somehow wiser and deeper. And in the course of this wedding service, I actually read a Hindu prayer. My dress was a simple shift of unbleached muslin. Instead of a bouquet, I did like the hippies in San Francisco. I had a wreath of flowers in my hair. You see how God makes jokes sometimes? When I started going to Orthodox weddings, I said, oh my goodness, this is much older than being a hippie in 1968. After the service, the puzzled caterer set out the requested vegetarian reception. And then as a string quartet played, we joined hands with our hippie friends and danced in circles under the trees. This seems to be the place where you say, I guess you had to be there. But you didn't actually have to be there. You're picturing it just fine. It's just like you imagine. When archaeologists discover our wedding photos, hundreds of years from now, they'll be able to place the date within 5 years. So now, May 18th, 1974, fast forward 25 years to the day that our youngest, our third child, went off to college. I had been out of town that weekend, and when I got home, I stood in the kitchen while my husband recounted the highlights of the day, driving him up there, getting him unpacked into the dormitory. And the house seemed strangely empty, perhaps just reverberating silently after all those years of rock music blasting. My husband was talking to me and I was listening to him. And I was looking at him and I was thinking, that's it? Is it just going to be him and me now for the rest of our lives? Just the two of us? It's a cliche for long married couples to say, well, there were ups and downs. This is one of those sayings that became a cliche because it's so true. As I looked forward from that night, standing in the kitchen and contemplating the years ahead, I would have said that was one of the downs. Children in the home had kept my days full of fun and busyness, and suddenly it was just him and me, and it didn't look like it was going to be enough. But not long after that, I ran into an older friend who was enjoying his post-retirement years and traveling with his wife, and he told me, we are more in love than ever. These have been the happiest days of our married life, and that gave me something to think about. So time passed, as it usually does. And at some later point, I realized that what my friend had said had become true for me as well. At some point in that glacial, imperceptible pace of married life, something had changed, or maybe I had changed. And now I can say we're more in love than ever, and these are truly the happiest days of our married life. How that happened, I don't really know. I wonder if there's anything I can say in general about the calling of being a wife. I only know about the calling of being a wife in this particular marriage. It seems like any advice that would apply to everyone would be so vague as to be useless. As I was writing this, I was checking online, tips, hacks for married life, and they tend to be like very vague. One of them had a list that included confront and master the inevitable crises of life. Okay, just check that off. Yet people living in our culture today clearly need some help in knowing how to make a marriage work. Statistics show that 43% of first marriages fail in the first 15 years. Second and later marriages fail 60% of the time. Despite this, most people do little preparing for marriage, harboring the illusion that all that reckless, headstrong early love is going to hold them together. And then when things get rocky, they don't know how to respond. Getting married is about the most far-reaching and life-changing thing people ever do. But they go into it knowing less than they would if they were planning to buy a ferret. Why do people get married? How do they stay married? If there is a sanctity, a holiness to marriage, what is the nature of that holiness? Just how much exalted significance can married life bear when it has to be conducted by two people who are crabby or oblivious or bored? I don't have wisdom adequate to the title that was handed to me. But over the years, I have learned some lessons that I hope might be useful to others. So I will pass on 11 lessons that I have learned about marriage. Perhaps the first thing, the first difficulty is that we don't think marriage is going to be difficult. We think we're in love and that solves everything. But as long as the two people in love are humans, then there's going to be misunderstandings, miscommunications, and misplaced expectations. The most pernicious factor in a marriage, or in any relationship really, is a sneaking suspicion that the other person has more power, that he's getting his own way too often, that things aren't fair. You can develop a habit of wary suspicion. It's easy to do this, and it's entirely contrary to our calling in Christ, which is to bear everything and embrace humility. A power struggle is like a teeter-totter, a seesaw that never comes to rest. As both partners adapt to it in self-defense, they form a long-term habit of vigilance and mistrust, and this makes them unwilling to risk generosity and unwilling to let any past unfairness go. Nothing good comes of this. This mutually assured dysfunction occurs so naturally, though, that preventing it requires some deliberate counter moves. We already know that we'd like to live in a different way. We already know that the people that we most admire are those who are kind and generous. We already know that the people that we want to be like are those who are humble and loving to others. The best love stories are the ones that are marked by great self-giving. You can start living in a story like that anytime you want. All you have to do is start practicing generosity, humility, and self-giving. But since we're human and timid and afraid of loss, it helps to make this goal mutual and explicit. I know a couple who made a vow on their wedding day to outserve each other. My husband and I evolved a pattern of making decisions based on who feels most strongly about it, rather than who got their way last time. It's whoever's really, I really, really want this. If I want to have Chinese food, but my husband really, really wants Italian tonight, then we get Italian. If I really, really want him to watch a Jane Austen movie with me, he does, until he falls asleep 45 minutes later. It doesn't matter who won last time, because a next time is always coming up. The future just keeps rolling into the present, and more good things to give and to receive are always going to be appearing. Second guideline or suggestion. Sometimes it is harder to receive than to give, actually. Receiving implies need, and admitting that you need something takes humility. So allow yourself and allow your husband to serve you sometimes. When he does, take notice and be grateful and say so out loud. Third, learn this. Many regrettable situations can be avoided by simply keeping your mouth shut. Fourth, a good time to keep your mouth shut is when your husband is telling a story and he gets something wrong. If he's doing anything less serious than teaching brain surgery, resist the urge to interrupt with a correction. If the listener walks away with a misremembered anecdote or a fumbled joke, no lasting harm has been done. This is an example of the larger principle, that of honoring your husband. As St. Paul said, let the wife see that she respects her husband. That's Ephesians 5:33. When you love your husband, you come more and more to just be on his side. It's like a matter of loyalty. You want him to succeed. You want people to look up to him. You don't want people to notice that he's getting the story wrong. You want to cover his flaws and highlight his gifts. You come to feel for your husband the kind of fierce loyalty that you feel toward your children. Married people should praise each other. Praise your husband to other people. Don't tell stories designed to make him look small or stupid. If your relationship needs help, then get help, but don't be a casual traitor. Fifth, a corollary to this is, don't complain to other people about your husband. Don't tell stories that are designed to make you, oh, sorry, I already did that one, didn't I? I'm not down to 6. I've got my cheat sheet. But that was one I really liked. I know what it's like to be in a group of women and you're always saying, my husband did the stupidest thing, and it's fun and it's funny and you enjoy talking about that. I don't remember when it dawned on me that that was really a wrong thing to do, and that I shouldn't be sharing those sorts of things with anybody else except, maybe my confessor. But it's not just fodder for gossip and for women to get together and laugh at their husbands. I think that's really an unhealthy thing that damages a marriage. As I was writing, that phrase came to me, don't be a casual traitor. And I thought, boy, that's a good connection of 2 words right there. We'll try again for number 6. Nobody talks about this, but one of the best things in marriage is the way you get punchy and silly when you're both overtired late at night. That's when some of the best long-running jokes of the relationship are going to make their debut. An awful lot has been said about the archetypal dignity of the marriage bed, but silliness in the marriage bed is also a great joy. 7, defenders of traditional marriage often say that having babies, producing a new generation, is the self-evident purpose of marriage. It's true that mating does hold an irreducibly basic place among human activities, or even just mammal activities. But there are many things we do that have meanings beyond their physical purpose. Like the basic purpose of food and drink is to keep the body alive, it's nutrition. And yet we eat and drink for many other reasons. Might have a slice of cake at a birthday party or a cup of coffee with a friend. While marriage is the right setting for sex, the sexual union of 2 people means much more than just making babies. As St. Paul says, this mystery is great, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church, Ephesians 5:32. And that's something just to ponder, because he's specifically talking about bodily marriage. He's talking about sex, basically. And that is what he sees as an icon somehow of the relationship between Christ and the church. It is a great mystery. St. John Chrysostom has some wonderful things on this, about saying it's like the 2 come together like a perfumer combining the ointment with the fragrance, and it all blends together. And that's how we become one. And then a child may appear from that, representing their oneness again. But even if there is no child, just that uniting, that beautiful fragrance is something very important, as St. Paul told us very briefly. He didn't explain it very much. Number 8 is something that I really wish I had known a long time ago. I learned this maybe 5 years ago, listening to a podcast episode of a podcast called Radio Lab. It's produced at WNYC in New York. And Radio Lab, it's always interesting things about science, different angles on science. In this one, the neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky explained that when we get angry, when a human being, male or female, gets angry, our bodies go through a lot of swift changes, and they're completely predictable, that the muscles tighten up, blood pressure rises, heart beats faster, adrenaline starts to surge. When you get angry, all those things start happening in your body. And when the argument is resolved, or when the situation is finished, for men, their bodies go back to normal very quickly, but not for women. For women, this intense adrenaline and tightening of the muscles and the heart pounding and all that, it just takes much longer for it to resolve. So even if the argument is over with, the woman's body is still telling her, you're really angry. And if you see you're finished arguing about this thing, then that's when you start doing that walk down memory lane. And you start thinking, well, there was also this thing that he did once. What about that thing that he did once? Because you think, I'm still angry. I must be angry about something else. I'm going to talk about other things I'm angry about. I did not know that that was something that it is your body is kind of compelling you to do. And when you recognize that, you can shut your mouth and walk away and just wait, go do something else, you know, until your body calms down again and you're no longer so angry. That was a really important thing for me to learn, just a basic, you know, fact of biology. You can't force your body to return to equilibrium. You can't do it by an act of will. You just have to wait it out. But Sapolsky says that when he and his wife have an argument, he says, we found it useful to say, honey, don't forget what the half-life is on the autonomic nervous system. So that's some good advice. Number 9, here's a way to put that information to practical effect. Go ahead and go to bed angry. Those lingering late night arguments are the worst arguments. You're exhausted, you're bleary, you're not even making sense, you're miserable. Just stop talking and turn out the light. Sleep really is a blessing. It restores us to ourselves. And things actually do look better in the morning. Number 10. One of the most difficult tasks in marriage is forgiveness. My husband has been a pastor for 40-something years. First as an Episcopal priest, 15 years, and Orthodox priest, 26 or 27, something like that now. Over that time, we've seen a lot of marriages in trouble. We've seen a lot of couples struggle. And after there's a breach in the marriage, a breach of trust, it's very hard to put it back together again. When there's a severe violation of trust, it's possible to forgive something that's already happened, that's over with, but looking toward the present and the future, restoring trust can be very, very difficult. Now, I think that is an important thing to remember about forgiveness, just in general, how forgiveness works. One reason people find it difficult is that they're afraid they're going to be hurt again. And they think it might give the other person kind of permission to go back and repeat the same thing that he did before. Some people think it means you're saying what he did wasn't really wrong, you know, or it was permissible, or it was understandable. That's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is based on, the premise has to be that real damage was done. Otherwise, you wouldn't be giving your forgiveness. It means that you all recognize that genuine damage was done. That's certainly the basis on which God forgives us, right? When you go to confession, you say, I did something wrong. You know, you don't try to deny or cover it up. The basis of forgiveness is recognizing that wrong was done. And forgiveness doesn't mean there can't be justice. You know, sometimes reciprocation or something else is the way that forgiveness needs to be balanced by an attempt to make something different. So forgiveness is not denial, and it is not overlooking a wrong that was done. It simply means making a decision to move on, that you're not going to cultivate anger about it anymore. You're not going to cherish revenge. They say staying angry is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Anger is just bad for you. You can do this. You can do this forgiveness even if the other person is not repentant. The injured person can still decide to forgive for the sake of her own soul's health, to decide to stop thinking about it, to stop brooding over it. Forgiving the other person is something that can be between you and God, just a decision you make. And if this is a person, probably not your husband in this case, but someone else who might still be able to hurt you, you don't even have to tell them that you have made this decision of forgiveness, that you're going to let go of what he did, what's already been done. Forgiveness is about the past. That's the thing to keep in mind. You can still make safe decisions about how you're going to think about something in the present or the future. What's in the past, you can just close that door. But it doesn't mean exposing yourself to risk. Trust is different from forgiveness. Trust might have to be earned or re-earned. Trust has to do with feeling that you are safe. It's a matter of the present and the future. As I said, you're not obligated to immediately trust the person that you've forgiven. In some situations, with some people, you might need to break off that relationship entirely. Like if you hired somebody to do work in your home and they did a bad job, you can forgive them. You can also take them to the Chamber of Commerce, and you never have to hire them again. That's what you would do if it was a low rank relationship. With a marriage, a lot more is at stake. It's possible to make a new start in the ashes of disappointment. Some marriages come back even stronger when pain and humiliation have opened a way to deeper honesty. There will be plenty of reasons over the years for forgiveness, to give forgiveness and to receive it in every marriage. And then my last point here is always remember that marriage does not exist in theory. It exists only in specific real-life manifestations. It is an ongoing, improvised project conducted by two fallible people. Our ideas about marriage are encumbered by so many preconceptions that at-home reality can suffer in comparison. We might think something is going wrong because our marriage is not fitting what our childhood idea of marriage was like. But it might merely be that this is the way this particular marriage is going to be like. One partner's preset notion of what a theoretical husband or wife with a capital H, capital W, what they should be like, can hurt the real life spouse in untold ways, even to the point that he or she gives up trying to please the other. When I was a feminist in the early 70s, my image of what marriage was, or what a husband was pretty dour. It was a surprise to find out the real marriage was something else entirely. It turned out that I didn't have to marry a husband. Instead, I could be married to my true love. My hero, my fun and funny best friend, the one that I loved so much. I felt like I kind of cheated. I was not having to go through the, quote, oppressive institution of marriage. Instead, I married my best friend instead of a husband. The purpose of every life is union with God. And the people we travel with in friendships and families, and particularly in marriage, are put there to help us on our way. A husband and a wife, knowing each other's faults and strengths and struggles, can make up what is lacking and learn from each other's strengths. Accountability shores up resolve. Unity is a bulwark, as it says in Ecclesiastes. And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. I always thought of that. The two is the husband and wife. The threefold cord is the Holy Spirit that's binding us together. The common center of their love gives each partner greater stores, greater resources of stability, security, and generosity. Resources that flow out from them to the whole world. We can see a parallel example in the pairs of saints who work together in this life, like the physician healers Zenaida and Philomela, or the Sophronius and John Moscus, those roving reporters that went through the desert interviewing desert fathers, spiritual fathers like Barsanuphius and John. These pairs felt for each other a familial or a friendship kind of love. Married love is different from that. But like them, married couples can find that sharing great love with another person in no way limits your ability to care for others and love others. In fact, having the support of another person enables more love for others, giving twice the resources to draw on, twice the strength, twice the insight, twice the compassion. When spouses are praying for each other, encouraging each other, they spur their mates on to greater heights. St. John Chrysostom said, "Let the husband hear of these things," that is the paths of virtue. "Let the husband hear of these things from the wife, and the wife from the husband. Let there be a kind of rivalry among all in endeavoring to gain precedence." So to sum up, the older I get, the more clearly I see that I really need my husband. The last decades of life are unpredictable and potentially tragic. It doesn't stop being tragic just because it has become so common. I heard the wife in an elderly couple I know was losing her mind to dementia. And I was sorry to hear it, but I accepted that news in the usual way. It's just one of those terrible things that can happen when you get older. But if you picture instead, it was a young couple in their 20s, and heard that for some reason the wife had begun gradually and irreversibly losing her mind, you wouldn't just say, "Oh, that's a shame." You'd be horrified at that. Well, it's just as horrifying to lose your beloved at the age of 70 or 80. The fact that everybody's treating it as just one of those things that happens would only make you feel more alone. Old age is surprisingly hard. My husband, even when I met him, he was 26. Even then, he already had a really sentimental idea about how wonderful old age was going to be. He thought the golden years, we'll enjoy ourselves, we'll travel, we'll do whatever we want. But as we've marched through our 60s, and now he's in his 70s, we're discovering that everything hurts. And nobody prepares you for this. When you're an adolescent, the school counselors and doctors always giving you like little brochures with titles like "Your Body is Changing." But when you're old, your body again goes through some extreme and permanent changes. Nobody warns you about this ahead of time. Old, reliable parts that have worked fine till now start unexpectedly failing. It seems like there's a wry joke hidden inside the old saying that two become one. My husband and I used to be two complete people, but now we have only one functioning set of knees, one reliable pair of ears, one pain-free right thumb. We're gradually getting whittled down from 2 to 1. It doesn't do any good to go to the doctor expecting healing. You're just to encounter a shrug. I went to a neurologist to find out why, after a lifetime of being a really great speller, I was now forgetting how to spell even simple words. He said, "It's perfectly normal. After you're 60, you've lost 25% of your brain cells." And I said, "That's not normal for me." For me, it's 100% is what I operate with. It's not in no way normal to lose 25%, but that's the way the world sees it, because that's what happens as you get older. It's normal only if the doctor means that what happens to me doesn't matter, because I am last year's model and I'm being phased out anyway. These losses would be very hard to bear at any time in life. Being old and weak and facing multiple losses at one time does not make it any easier. This is when you really need a good marriage. You need somebody who will be on your side, who will care about you and fight for you as you become weaker and less able to do things for yourself. You might wind up with dementia. You might be incontinent. The people who are hired to give care in these cases are not well paid. Few go into that line of work because they really love old people. Well, not all old people are lovable. Some are angry and verbally abusive. That could be you too. When you're old and helpless, you are only as safe as the amount of love in the person beside you. Are you saving up for retirement? Save up for this impoverishment every day. It might turn out to be a hard job being with you in your old age. If you pour yourself out in love for each other every day, you make the best possible investment against that time. The calling of being a wife is high and holy because it is eternal. All the things that you own are temporary. The only thing that lasts forever is people. Each person is an eternal being, called and destined to blaze up with the glory of God. Wives and husbands are especially called to tend each other as they walk the way of the cross, the way of transformation, a way that never comes to an end. When St. John Chrysostom comforted a young widow, he reminded her that she would be with her husband for eternity, said, not in his earthly beauty, but in radiance of an eternal and unimaginable kind. Chrysostom wrote to this widow, you shall depart one day to join him, not for 20 or 100 years, not for 1,000 or twice that number, but for infinite and endless ages. Then you will receive him back again, no longer in the physical beauty he had when he departed, but in luster of another kind and splendor outshining the rays of the sun. So this is our destiny as wives and husbands. Let us spend our humble earthly lives in the sort of love that prepares us for glory. Thank you. I hope you were satisfied with that. I've not tried to read a speech and I couldn't hear any laughing.
No, I see like some ladies that were like smiling. Yes. Yes, everyone now, if you have any question, please raise your hand. And Khuriya Kelly and Angela, they will unmute you. And there is a, yes, Francis, she said thank you. And anyone, any questions for Khuriya Frederica?
About anything. It doesn't have to be about this topic.
Yes. Did you hear what she said? She said about anything, not just only about this topic.
I see one person here with their hand raised.
Yes.
Is it Vanya Lee? I'm going to unmute you if you would like to go ahead and answer your question.
That's a good question.
Yes.
Well, I am unmuting you. Are you able to unmute yourself, Savanya?
I think her question was from earlier, Hodia Kelly.
Oh, okay.
About
Okay.
the limit.
So there's some then and some comments that we're going through in this section. Everybody's saying thank you so much for your speech. They're very grateful.
I see them. Yeah, they're rolling up. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Of course.
One person asks, please tell us the source of the story of St. John to the widow.
Okay. St. John Chrysostom, of course, wrote commentaries on all kinds of wonderful things and homilies, but we also have some letters, personal letters that he wrote. This is a short letter. It's called Letter to a Young Widow. Apparently she'd been married 5 years when her husband died. Doesn't say how he died, but he wrote her this letter to comfort her, and it's really a beautiful letter. So in any collection of St. John Chrysostom, you should be able to find that, for example, online. You know, it should be online.
Christ is risen, someone said.
Indeed.
He's risen for everyone.
Will we be able to access the recording afterward? That's a question I just saw and I was wondering.
Yes, we record it. Yes, we record it.
Okay,
We're going to forward it for everyone because now we're 99 ladies joined us to join the meeting. But there is some ladies, they're waiting. Unfortunately, we cannot let them in, like the system, not us, let them in. And because like that, just only Zoom take up to 100. After
Okay.
100 is gonna, they limit the number, and we will email you the recording
Mhm.
of your for everyone of your talk. We're gonna post it on our Facebook, and please every all of you share our page and like our page on Facebook, and we will do it more than like this is the first talk with you, Horia, Frederica. We're gonna do more of these talk, like maybe once a month. We didn't decide yet. We're gonna do more.
That's a good.
And there is any John said the Christ is risen, indeed he's risen. And any question, Horia, Kelly, Angela, do you see any
Yes,
question?
I see Rebecca Clark has her hand raised, so I'm
Yeah.
going to unmute her. Give me
Okay.
one quick second, Rebecca. Apologize. Oh, you're available. Go ahead.
Hi, Frederica. It's so good to see you.
Hi.
Thank you for coming and talking with us.
Sure.
So my question, one of your pieces of advice was so great about keeping your mouth shut. And I frequently find it's like in the evening and I've had a day of like growing sort of thoughts in my mind, and I just decide to like let the words out, and I immediately regret it because it would have been so much better if I just. So I wanted to know if you had any additional words about learning to keep one's mouth shut.
Yes. Yeah. And I always think about when I was home with the kids when they were growing up, and I would be like waiting till my husband gets home, and then I want to just dump on him everything that's happened, and I want him to take charge of everything. And he kept saying, "Please just give me 10 minutes to relax." And I resented giving him those 10 minutes. It was like the minute he walks in the door, I want to wash my hands of him. That is a time that I wish, looking back, I really wish I'd been better about just keeping my mouth shut and giving him some time. The difficult thing about keeping your mouth shut is that it's bouncing inside. It's just yearning to come out. And if it's not something that will make your husband look bad, that's a really good reason to have friends. It's one of the things that you can share with your friends about what you're frustrated about. As I said, not to put your husband down, but there's so many other things in our minds that are frustrating us. It seems like women have a different way of talking to each other than the way men and women talk. It's certainly different from the way men talk to each other. What's his name? Brian Regan. The comedian Brian Regan.
Okay.
He's very funny, and you can look it up. It's Regan, Brian Regan. But he does, at the end of one of his routines, he says, I was going out to play golf with my friend Jim, and his marriage was in trouble, and we knew about that. And so when I got home from playing golf, my wife said, "So how is Jim doing? And how is his wife doing? And what's going on?" And he said, "We just didn't talk about any of that." And she's like, "How could you not talk about that?"
Yeah.
So it's just different. And it's a shame that in our culture, we really don't live in extended families anymore. We split off into these little two-person couples, and then we try to get all of our friendship needs met by our spouse.
Yeah.
Because you pick up your bags and you move somewhere else every few years. So I think intentionally cultivate female friends, because you can talk to them better than you can talk to your husband. And try not to have the expectation that your husband will meet all of your emotional needs. I think God puts us in communities so that we will have some other sources to draw on.
I have a question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I know that voice. That's Elaine, isn't it?
Yeah,
And Baba.
I'm so sorry. I don't have my computer that says raise your hand.
Oh, okay. I can hear you though.
Okay. My question is that I remember reading in the Bible, I'm not sure if it's a Proverbs or Ecclesiastics, where there is a recommendation to not let the sun go down on your anger, because of the resentment that ends up building up when you sleep on your anger. It becomes a sort of a non-distinct. It's no longer an anger. It just becomes a feeling of like resentment and so forth. And yet one of your points was to go to sleep. So I see a bit of a difference there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know where that line is. I think maybe you're right. Maybe it's in Proverbs. It says, "Don't let the sun go down on your anger." And I think what that is about is don't let the day end still being in a conflict with someone else, if it's possible. Perhaps they're not willing to resolve the conflict, but if possible, make your peace with someone else, forgive them, ask their forgiveness, do whatever in your part that you can do. I'm thinking about a different kind of situation. It certainly is a kind of argument that I remember having in the earlier years of my marriage, where you could get angry at each other late at night and just keep arguing and arguing. And the problem is that the anger in your body keeps building. And you're in the state where you're both physically exhausted and yet just charging with this energy of anger. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is for you to think clearly. So I sort of say, go ahead and go to bed angry. I think there's many situations where you should just cut it off and stop talking. That's really the point of that. Just cut it off and stop talking about it, because you just make things worse and you're not able to think clearly enough to resolve it at that point. So that's what I meant by go to bed angry. Because it's such a common phrase. I was reversing how people say, never go to bed angry. But I think you raise another point physiologically, which is, what does it do to us if we try to sleep while our body is still churning? And that's something really worth looking into, and you don't know much about. It may well be that what I think you're saying is that in your sleepy state, this anger sort of melts and leaks all over other things, and you end up feeling more confused when you get up in the morning. I know you're a nurse, and perhaps that's something you have some more knowledge about than me. Yeah, I chose go to bed angry just because everybody says don't go to bed angry. But the point is to stop arguing. Maybe you're not ready to go to sleep then. Maybe you're not in bed. Maybe you need to get up and walk around the house for a while. The going to bed part was not the important. The important part was just stop arguing.
Thank you, Frederica. Kali, there is a question.
We have a lot of questions.
Yeah. Can you read? Not the one before? There is a message, I think number 36. There is a question there.
Well, Angela has one, I think, waiting too.
There's one from Svetlana. It says, thank you for a wonderful lecture. Is there certain requirements or qualities for a husband?
Are there certain requirements for the qualities for a husband? This sounds kind of trivial, but I think having a similar sense of humor has helped me so much with my husband. We just hit it off instantly in what we thought was funny. And being able to share humor has been just wonderful throughout the 36 years of our marriage. I would say honesty, that this is not a person who's going to be making up stories or telling you lies. I would certainly prioritize honesty. Maturity is good. I had another section in this chapter that my husband asked me to take out. I said, when we got married, I was 21, he was 28, I guess, 27. He just was very mature, and I wasn't. I was still, bouncing from one thing to another, trying these different religions and being a real loudmouth feminist, early 70s type feminist. And he took a chance on me, and I really appreciate his patience. I'm really glad I married somebody who was emotionally mature. If you can get them, that's really good. I don't know how important physical attraction is. I think if you can love the person inside, then the body can become attractive to you. I heard I think it was a sociologist once say there are 3 stages, you go through. For initially, it's attraction that draws you together, and that's a brief stage, but it's physical attraction to a large extent. And the second is affection. Affection was second. I remember it was 3 A's. Attraction, affection, when you just start to cherish them and everything about them, you just love everything you're discovering. But the last and the long-lasting one is attachment. And when you reach that point, it doesn't so much matter that they don't look as cute and handsome as they did 20 years earlier, because you're attached to them. You're just sort of molded and melded to them. So I would, in a list of things, I would definitely not put, physical appearance first. I just lucked out that way with my husband. But honesty and maturity and a sense of humor, those are the first three that come to mind. Do we get cut off at 4 o'clock? I just want to ask, is this?
No, there is no limit, no time limit.
Okay.
No, we're good. We still have until, like we said, 1 hour, 30 minutes, 2 hours. We still have until 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it depends on the question. There is more question, Angela?
Yes, the next question is from Susan. It says, you spoke on forgiveness among married couples. Can you speak to forgiveness of or with children, specifically kids who have challenges or they're adopted, etc.?
Oh boy, that's really difficult. I bet you could speak about that better than I could. I know what you mean. Raising kids is just, it's so complicated because you always run the risk of forgiveness being interpreted as indulgence or even approval. And you need to motivate something in them that makes them want to do better. But there's only so much you can do by putting limits or by talking to them or by putting them on probation, have to stay in the house. If the motivation is not inside of them to change, there's a limited amount that external strictures can do, especially as they get older. And we know too, there's the problem of the friends. What are the friends like? How are the friends influencing them? And do they just seem to continuously admire qualities in friends that are not really healthy? I wish I had more to say. I wish I had more wisdom on the question of children with challenges, children that are challenges. I think that the rule of thumb is always you forgive what's in the past, but you don't have to trust for the present and the future. Maybe that needs to be earned. And you can say the past is finished. You did wrong. You did really wrong. But I am making a decision to let that go. I'm not going to seek revenge. I'm not going to, maybe there are civil things that need to happen. Maybe he needs to go before a judge if it's serious enough. But in terms of your personal holding it over him, you're letting that go. But raising a child that you can trust to make the right decisions, that's a huge job.
Frederica, I have a question here from Katie. I'm going to unmute her so she can ask herself.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Kriya. Thank you so much for talking to us. I'm all like soppy and emotional, so I'm sorry if I kind of choke up. I actually was chrismated last Palm Sunday, and you have been a huge part of learning to come into the church, and I really thank you for that. It's been really awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I love hearing that. That's great. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I remember I think it was like a snippet that you read from one of your books, you talked about being up with your babies and that being your time to really meditate on the Jesus prayer. And I thought that was a really interesting idea as a single woman who has no babies. I'm like, I wonder, maybe I don't know. I guess I was looking for some maybe live advice on if I'm not getting up with babies in the middle of the night. I don't know, is that a thing is that a habit I should build in such the case that I might have babies, or what do you think about that?
Katie, where are you from before?
Sorry?
So I'm in Virginia, and I moved here a couple of years ago from Arizona, and my friends from Arizona converted all together, and I sort of joined in with them.
Which church you go to?
I go to Kriya Kelly's St. Basil.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for interruption.
That's all right. She was referring to my own personal prayer life. When I was still Episcopalian, still Protestant, I felt a lot of pressure to have a daily prayer time. It's just something that Protestants talk about. You should have your daily quiet time with the Lord. And usually you'd read the Bible and then say your intercessory prayers. I found it really hard to block out time. That as I was going through the day, just love going. I want to keep going. I don't want to stop. And like making myself sit down and pray was really, really hard. And I read in, I think it was a woman's magazine, like Redbook or something. And it was a woman talking about her prayer life and her faith. And she said that was when she found a good time to pray, was to wake up at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning and have your little prayer time then, and then go back to sleep. And it's good because there's no interruptions. And when I read that, I was pregnant with my first child. So I thought, well, I'll be getting up in the middle of the night to nurse the baby and change the diaper anyway. So after I do that, then I'll just go have my prayer time. And that baby is now 43 years old, 43. And I never stopped doing it. You know, I started doing it then. And what I did in that time has changed so much over the years. I mean, at first I was doing Episcopal, prayer book prayers and reading my Bible then. And gradually I did like, I'll do the Bible first thing in the morning, the prayers late at night. So I have a lot of little prayer stops through the day where I just do some short prayers. The big prayer time is the middle of the night. I never know when I'm going to wake up. It's never been consistent. It might be an hour after I fell asleep. It might be an hour before the alarm clock is supposed to ring. And I just say the Trisagion prayers, the O Heavenly King, Comforter, all the way through the Our Father. And then I have a long prayer rope with 200 knots. And I just go through it saying Jesus prayer. I don't know what to give the credit to. Is it that prayer time? Or I think dividing it up and having a lot of little stoplights in the day. I think that was a very powerful factor in changing my prayer life and making it much deeper, because I was having to stop and think about God over and over and over, or even to stop and think, is it time to pray? Oh, it isn't, but hi God, man, that even though the quality of the prayer time itself wasn't that great, just having that habit of stopping, it made a huge difference in my prayer life. But when I pray the Jesus prayer now in the middle of the night, it gets so deep. And sometimes it's just wordless. I'm just going through one knot at a time and just feeling the glory of God. There are times that I don't want to say, have mercy on me, because I don't want to talk about me. I just want all of creation to praise the Lord. I understand that psalm, we're saying that the rocks and the trees and the mountains and the bunny rabbits, everybody praise the Lord. Because I feel like I'm not big enough, like my heart isn't big enough to contain all the praise I want to give him. It's different every night. Usually I'm up for about an hour and then I go back to sleep. And I really believe that my prayer life has changed and gotten so much better over the years. So maybe partly it's the midnight prayer time and partly it's the, little traffic lights where I remember God, all day long. I really recommend it. I think your question was not quite that. You were asking about, you're not going to have a baby anytime, immediately. So should you be forming this habit of getting up at night? I think it's not many people actually do it this way, but I have on my travels, I've met people from time to time that said this is the same thing that happened to them. They kind of got this idea, or it just seemed like the right thing to do. Or, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you tend to wake up in the night, maybe God is calling you to just sit on the side of the bed and start saying the Jesus prayer.
This
Sometimes
is also
when you're doing that, you will feel you need to intercede for someone. A person's name will come to you or their face, and God will really use you in intercession at that time. So if you are waking up, sit up and just say some Jesus prayers. I let the Lord wake me up. And so in your case, you might, if you're not waking up naturally, you might feel like, well, do I set my alarm?
Right.
I think a way to test it would be to say, Lord, I would be willing to pray this way, if that's your will for me, if that's what you're calling me to. And I'm going to leave it up to you. If I wake up, I'll sit up and I'll say at least 5 Jesus prayers before I fall asleep again. The wonderful thing about the Jesus prayer is it teaches you how to say the Jesus prayer. As you say it more and more, it just like settles in and it clinks into place. And if you get up and you just are faithful to say just 5 repetitions, I think you'll find that the Holy Spirit takes over and opens up the prayer to you, and it gets deeper and deeper. So ask the Lord, tell him it would be okay for him to wake you up and see what happens.
It's a good idea. Love it. Thank you. Thank you for your Frederica.
Frederica. We have, I'm going to combine two questions into one. Two people were asking something very similar. What advice might you have for divided or mixed marriages where one is practicing Orthodox and the other is non, or perhaps just somebody who is growing faithfully and the other is not?
Oh, that is difficult. Yes. So you're in a marriage where, of course, you know, often it's a case where you're both Catholic or Protestant and then one becomes Orthodox. And it takes extra love to do that. It may be that you went into the marriage of two different faiths and you didn't realize how important that was going to be and how difficult it can make things just practically. For example, during Holy Week and Pascha, you know, if you and the kids are trying to do all the church stuff and your husband doesn't want to go. I've also seen situations where the husband just really isn't interested in faith. It's just not one of his hobbies. It doesn't catch his attention. Maybe he's devoted to sports. You know, sometimes that's what it is. That's the thing he really loves, but faith doesn't really matter to him. I would recommend to you another book by David and Mary Ford. I'll repeat what I said at the beginning. The talk I just gave was a chapter I wrote for Glory and Honor, their book about the book about Orthodox marriage. I was just like, Glory and Honor, Orthodox Christian Resources on Marriage. They have a previous book that's called Lives of the Married Saints. We Orthodox learn a lot of things by looking at people who did it right. Just as if a little boy wanted to learn how to, you know, swing his bat, and he would look at images of the great batters and see how they stood and how they held it. If we look at married saints, we learn from them more and more how to do it. When my son David got married, somebody gave him a little book that was also about married saints, and he said he and his wife started reading it, and it was mostly people who were saints because they were in horrible marriages. It wasn't really that encouraging a book to read at that time. But that's what you'll find as you look at married saints. There were some who had to endure very difficult things. There were some that they were of a different faith from their marriage, from their husband, and they didn't have that unity in the home. There were some where the children had no interest in continuing in that faith. When we look at great saints who went through difficult times, we learn more about how to do it. So that's what I'd recommend. David and Mary Ford, the book is called Lives of the Married Saints. Mostly they are positive stories, not negative ones in that book.
For you, Frederica, if anyone of the ladies interested to buy your book, where they can access it?
Boy, my books are everywhere. So if you go on Amazon or any booksellers, you'll probably find it there. You can always buy my books. This particular book, I didn't write the whole thing. I just wrote just one chapter, I think. I really did try to get out of it. Before I knew it, he's wanting me to write a second chapter. Very persuasive man. The book I was reading from, I only have this one chapter, and again, it's published by St. Vladimir Seminary Press. You know, I think I said St. Tikhon's earlier. They are professors at St. Tikhon's, but it was published by St. Vladimir's. And the title is Glory and Honor, Orthodox Christian Resources on Marriage. The authors are David and Mary Ford.
Thank you, Horia. I'm sure there's more questions, Horia. Angela? Kelly?
We have a raised hand too. Let me unmute if it's still wait. I think there she is. Anna, we have a raised hand. I'm going to unmute you, Anna, to ask your question.
Our Anna?
Hello, Anna.
Not our Anna. Anna R.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I learned a lot from it. I am single myself, but I learned great pieces of wisdom. My question is about the concept of submission in the Bible, like how Paul talks about the man being the head of the woman in this chapter about submission. I don't know, it makes me angry sometimes, and it makes me not look forward to marriage. So I'd like to hear what you think of that.
Oh, yeah. I know there's, I should know better, to get the citations right, but I know someplace St. Paul says the wives should submit to the husbands. And then there's someplace where he says they should submit to each other, which is more of what I was talking about. You try to outserve each other. There's a, if you know converts, especially Protestant converts, they love to talk about C.S. Lewis, who was a wonderful Christian writer, died in 1963, English. And he has a wonderful passage in his book, The Four Loves. He talks about the four Greek words for love, storge, philia, eros, and agape. And he says that what St. Paul is talking about when he says the wife should submit to the husband, but then he says, let the husband be like Christ is to the church. That is, Christ died for the church. Christ gave everything. That he is asked to do something even more difficult than women are. And I see this throughout history, it seems so obvious to men that if women are in danger, they should die to protect the women. That even if it's a woman that they've never seen before, somebody shooting at a woman on the street, they would step in front of her to try to protect her. It's just innate, this impulse to do that. So Lewis pointed that out, that when he says, wives submit to your husband, he doesn't then say, husbands lord it over your wives. He says, husbands, be ready to die for your wives. He's called to an even greater brokenness. So I think that is the Bible teaching. And I think that is what the Bible says, that husbands are called to give just as much or more than women are. But I understand your frustration with the word submission. It's not a word that we like anymore. And it can be misinterpreted, I think. Anything else?
I have a question here from Lily. She wants to know if you have any advice for preparing for marriage.
Preparing for marriage. If you don't yet know who you're going to marry, start praying for that person. Pray every day for this man, that they are growing in maturity, in the depth of their faith, that they are loving the Lord more and more. Just as you draw him towards you, as he draws you to him, as the Lord draws you two together, already be praying for him and making smooth that path before him. I think it's better to marry younger if you're able to, because the older you get, the harder it is to change all those little habits, like squeezing the toothpaste tube in the middle instead of at the end. Those little things can be so irritating. So try to be aware of those things and to keep yourself loose and flexible about the little stuff, so it won't become a barrier once you actually do marry and set up housekeeping together. There are always surprises after marriage. There are things that today, my husband had a nosebleed before church. We had to go later, we missed Orthodox. And he said, I need Kleenex. So I gave him one. And he said, you only use one? And we've been married 47 years. I didn't know. He takes two and he bunches them up. I said, no, you take one and you fold it over. And so it was a totally different approach to Kleenex. You keep learning things about your spouse all the way along. So pray for them and try to not get too locked into your habits and your preferences. Be ready to be flexible about that. It's really stupid stuff to stress a marriage over, those little likes and dislikes. So be aware of yourself, not hanging on to things too tightly.
That goes into another question. Somebody asked, what was the greatest struggle that you and your husband have ever endured?
The what kind of struggle?
Just the greatest struggle that you've had to endure together.
The greatest struggle that we've had to endure together. I might say it was our journey to Orthodoxy. That he had been an Episcopal priest for 15 years. And we were really, we were getting more and more worried about the church because there was a bishop in New Jersey who was publishing books that said Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Just the disciples all felt better a couple of days later and they made up a story. It's not even logical, because if that were true, they wouldn't have died as martyrs. But he was saying, oh, Mary wasn't really a virgin. and these terrible, these heartbreaking things, you know. And then we saw like nobody was standing up to him and saying, you can't be a bishop and say things like that. And then other bishops, for some reason in the Episcopal Church, it was like the bishops were the problem even more than the lay people and the clergy. So we were really concerned about these things that were becoming kind of different sorts of creeds and beliefs in the Episcopal Church as it went off from the ancient faith. And we started looking around for a church that we could go to instead. When my husband discovered Orthodoxy, he instantly loved it. And he went to Vespers on a Saturday night, and he came back and he was just saying, this is so great, this is so wonderful, this is the true church, I have to be Orthodox. And so the next week I went with him, and I didn't like it at all. Everything that he saw, I didn't see it that way. It was like, why are we standing up all the time? And why is this, what's this wall with the doors in it? And you never know which door the priest is going to come out of next. And he comes out one, he goes in another one. Meanwhile, the choir is just singing, singing, singing. And I didn't like it. That was, we had maybe 2 years of me saying, I don't get it. I kept going back, and he would be all melting about how wonderful it was. And I think what I was used to was that kind of Protestant worship that is so much about your feelings. And it's so focused on you. And when you talk about Jesus, you're always saying, Jesus is looking down on me, and Jesus is loving me, and Jesus is cuddling me. It was so baby, you know, but it was very focused on self. And I found that very comfortable. I love focusing on myself in worship. And Orthodoxy was like grown-up religion. It took me quite a while to even be willing to be chrismated. It was funny because it was in our household, we had one daughter, 2 sons. So it was like me and my daughter were the two saying, this church is weird. And it was my husband and the 2 sons. They got it. They just loved it right away. So my husband was finally at the point where he said, even if I couldn't be a pastor, I have to be Orthodox. I would get a job with UPS or selling shoes or something, you know, but I just have to be in this church. So I said, I don't see it and I don't get it, but I trust you. I know that you have never led me wrong. So I'm going to make a leap of faith and I'll just follow you. I'll do it. I'll be chrismated. And the day we were chrismated, my daughter and I were so overwhelmed by the beauty of it. It was like he rewarded our being willing. Hey, maybe that's an example of wifely submission. It was like I submitted to his leadership. You know what I'd said earlier about the person who feels the most strongly about something? That's usually me. I feel stronger about things. This was one time when he was really just felt this so deeply and I didn't get it. So when we were chrismated, it really is a sacrament and it changed our hearts that day when we were chrismated. I think that was probably the biggest struggle that we had. Thank God it wasn't like we were arguing. It was like I just couldn't see what he saw in it and I didn't find it attractive. I didn't have arguments about it's a bad church or anything. It wasn't that kind of a struggle, but it was like just a big blank space for me. Now you know how much I love Orthodoxy. So in this case, it did turn out well for me to go ahead and follow him, even though I didn't see where we were going.
Well, Judy, it turned out well for all of us. I do have one other question here. You encouraged wives not to speak their husbands down. What advice would you give us as women when we speak to one another? How do we gently encourage each other to move away from such speech while it's happening?
Yes, yeah. I recall it was a new friend, somebody that I just met who just started coming to our church. And I noticed that when we were together, she wouldn't so much criticize her husband as make jokes about things he was doing badly. And in that case, I went to her privately, sometime when it was just the 2 of us, and I said, you really should do a better job of honoring your husband and shielding people from the little things he does wrong or the little foolish things he does. He deserves that kind of respect, just like you would deserve it. You wouldn't want him talking about you this way to his male friends. And in that case, she immediately got it. She saw what I was saying. She understood it right away. hadn't really thought about what she was doing when she talked about her husband that way. And this is now a very old friend, like 30 years, and she's been very good about it all these decades. So I would say speak to the person privately and gently, but just make those kind of points that your husband, you love him, he deserves better than this. And wouldn't you want him to honor you with silence rather than telling all his friends about the mistakes you make?
More question, ladies?
Anything else?
Yeah, there's a couple more questions. One was from Lisa. Let me see if I can't find it again. She asked if you could please remind us of the book or collection of essays in which you wrote this for. She said it was simply lovely and would wish to dwell on it again.
Thank you, thank you. The title of the book is Glory and Honor. You remember in the wedding service, the priest says, crown them with glory and honor 3 times. So that's the title, Glory and Honor. And then the subtitle is Orthodox Christian Resources on Marriage. It's a collection of essays of advice about marriage or how the fathers looked at marriage and things like that. It's a very interesting book. And there is another chapter written by a guy on the high and holy calling of being a husband. So that's helpful to compare with it. I do recommend this book. I like it very much. The authors are a married couple, David and Mary Ford, F-O-R-D. They're professors at St. Tikhon's, but it was published by St. Vladimir's. It shouldn't be hard to find. If you type in Glory and Honor and then Ford, it should pop right up.
And another quick question was if you could please tell the Science-y podcast that you were, from which you learned this physiological response to anger.
Yes, yeah. It's a podcast called Radio Lab. So just like the 2 words stuck together, Radio Lab. And it's from WNYC. So you could probably find it anywhere there's a collection of podcasts. But man, I learned so much. The whole thing about colors, like somebody realized that there are colors that Homer never speaks of in the Iliad and the Odyssey. He never refers to blue. Nothing is ever blue. You know, he says the wine dark sea as if the sea is red. And so it's about how people didn't have names for colors for centuries. And gradually our naming of colors just grew and grew. There are so many things like that I learned from Radio Lab that are just fascinating. So I think you'll like it. You'll get hooked pretty quickly.
Judy, there's another question. Do you consider time as a factor to ease divergence and difficulties in marriage relationship?
Do I think time is a factor in easing differences in marriage? I guess that was it. Boy, it really is. Time is, there's so many things that if I'd known, I would realize that this is a situation that will resolve over time. And I don't have to be that anxious about fixing it right now. You know, I just always wanted everything to be fixed. And I think almost everything resolves in time. The difficulty is that you can't imagine living with this any longer, but the days keep going by and you do keep on living with it. And then at some point you realize either it doesn't bother you anymore or the behavior changed. So yeah, if it's something that you can talk about, then do talk about it and say, you know, really bothers me the way you pop your bubble gum or whatever it is, and see if they can remember, you know, that is something you've asked. But if it remains a knot, if you stick to each other, you just stay together day after day, night after night, time passes, and you'll find that at some point it's not a problem anymore. So yes, I do definitely recommend time.
Judy, Kelly, is there another one that we missed?
I've been trying to watch and keep track. There's been quite a few coming in. Does anybody want to raise their hand if we missed you?
I see.
There's a question from Bangrita. Did you see that?
At what time?
409.
I didn't see it.
Can you give me some guidance on arguing with my spouse?
Guidance on arguing with your spouse. I think probably the first thing to keep in mind is to stick to one topic. it's so natural to start looking a little bit to the side and say, well, this thing is connected and that thing is connected. And then it becomes this big ball of wax that you really can't deal with. So try to just deal with one specific thing at a time. If you feel yourself becoming really angry, just break it off. Just say, I'm feeling really angry and I don't want to talk while I'm feeling this way. And just do something else for your body to calm down again for a while. And try to remember that you really, really do love him. And if something is a continuing problem, maybe there's another way to solve it. Like we learned very early in our marriage that I was better at paying the bills and keeping track of financing and all that stuff, that he tends to let the mail just stack up. And I could never do that. I've got to resolve everything. I got to fix it and make that call. And so it just was better, for me to do this. You find over time that you actually are stronger in different areas. I saw a little question go by in the chat somewhere about what kind of roles, did we take on the traditional roles? And I guess that's not traditional. Usually the husband is the one who does the taxes. I always did the taxes. But he always did the cooking. When I was growing up, nobody ever taught me to cook. My mother didn't teach me anything about cooking. I just like baking. I think when this is over, I'm going to go make cookies. But, if you hand me a raw chicken, I have no idea what to do. I remember he sent me to the store for broccoli, and he was telling me what to look for in fresh broccoli. Nobody had ever taught me that. He enjoys cooking. In fact, both of my sons really enjoy cooking and cook, maybe more, get a bigger kick out of it even than their wives do. So he led the example for our sons of, the daddy in the house can be the cook. And I did a lot of wonderful eating that I didn't have to produce meals. The deal we made was that he would do the cooking and I would do most of the child rearing. I would make sure the toddler got a bath, put them to bed, go to meetings with the teachers and all. I took over most of that because I didn't have a job and he was a pastor and he was so very busy. And I thought, now I'm coming out ahead because one day the kids are going to grow up, but we're always going to eat. So my job would come to a natural conclusion, but he would still go on cooking. So I see there's a chicken out there in the kitchen. We'll see what happens later tonight. I bet it's going to be cooked.
It's funny, that actually leads into another question that I had missed by Nicole. She wants to know if you have any advice for the second 10 years as the babies stop coming and as the kids start getting older, how to avoid getting out of ruts.
Okay, I'm not sure I heard all that. It was advice for the what kind of years? The secondary years?
Yeah, like the second 10 years. So
Yeah.
Once you're out of the baby stage, do you have any advice as the kids start to get older to keep your marriage fresh, I think is what she's asking.
Keeping marriage fresh, yes. That happened for me, as I'd said at the beginning of this talk, but I don't know that I did anything to make it happen. In fact, at first I was kind of skeptical that the house is just going to seem so empty. And I think my husband just wasn't that interesting to me at that point. I had begun doing, I guess maybe 10 years before, lots and lots of public speaking and traveling, being interviewed, and I had this very lively life. And then when I come home to my home, there would be a couple of teenagers there and they would want to show me the latest album by so-and-so. And there was always a lot going on. So when the kids moved out and the house is so quiet and it's just my husband cooking dinner, have to give him that. We were in the kitchen, he was cooking dinner. I just thought, this is so boring, how am I going to get through this? We didn't do anything to actively change that, but as time went by, I just began to love him more and more. He's just more and more precious to me. And maybe even the fact that we get older and we have these aches and pains and nosebleeds and things like that, I think as you get into that third stage of attachment, attraction, affection, attachment, it's more like the love I had for my children, that I wanted to protect them. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted them to do a good job so other people would like them and think they were doing well. I feel that same kind of protective love for my husband, which I know is what he has for me. I don't know how to make that happen, and I didn't try to make it happen, But perhaps if you have those as kind of like destination points, if you have choices about which road to take the one that leads you that direction.
Thank you. More question, ladies?
I think that we answered everything in the group chat. If anybody else did not get their question answered, would you mind putting in the chat window or raising your hand, kind of a last call, so to speak?
Can I also say, maybe it's something you don't want to say out loud or in public. I am always happy to answer email. So if you want to send me an email, there's a contact form on my website, which is frederica.com. Or you can write me at fmg@frederica.com. I do get a lot of mail from people all over the world. I just got one this morning from a friend in Australia saying, I'm praying for you in the coronavirus. I like answering email. I feel like it's one of the callings God's given to me is to interact with people one-on-one. So fmg@frederica.com. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, or you think of it later, or you just wanted it to be a private question. Anything else for now, though?
Anyone raise their hands? If not, now we're like 1 hour, 30 minutes. I'm sure Frederica, she's getting tired. And last chance before we end up our call.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
One of the first times I spoke after we were chrismated. We were chrismated in January 1993, and it was June of 93 that the Antiochian Women, the national organization, invited me to speak. It was a year that we were having the convention was in New York. It was in Manhattan, and I was asked to come up and give a talk. And I thought, why would they ask me? I don't know anything. I've only been Orthodox 6 months. And so I came and spoke, and y'all were just so gracious to me and so appreciative. And you gave me an honor I didn't deserve. You know, I certainly had not earned the right to speak about anything to the Antiochian women. And then I compared that with how I was treated in the Episcopal Church, because I was conservative. I wanted the Nicene Creed to be what we still believed. They didn't want to say Jesus didn't rise from the dead. And I believed in conservative sexual morality too. Because of that, I was very much unwelcome in the Episcopal Church. People with opinions like me were not allowed to speak. I was never invited to speak at any national convention. But I'd only been 6 months, and you asked me to come speak. I was so touched by that. And I thought over the years, I've just seen the gift of hospitality is something that is so strong among Antiochian women. It is like a spiritual gift that you've been given. And that was what you did for me. You didn't just say, come to the meeting. You said, you can actually speak, say something to us. It was overwhelming, that honor, that hospitality. It is something I valued so much in meeting people who've been Antiochian all their lives and forming those friendships. I don't think Americans definitely were not as hospitable as you are. And I just want to thank you for inviting me all those years ago to come.
Thank you. We have the pleasure to invite you, and thank you. It's amazing talk. Really, the Orthodox, where this is our tradition. Always we're welcoming people to our community, and we're glad, we're honored to have you on our call. And Ani Khuriya, Kali Khuriya, and Angela, there is any question before we end up our call? Any raise hand? Anything?
There's one odd question, because she calls it an odd question. Did you always wear your wedding ring on your right hand?
Oh, yeah, I've got my wedding ring on my right hand. This is kind of a strange story. We didn't know that Orthodox usually have the wedding ring on the right hand. We had been Orthodox almost 10 years, you know, when we heard that. And my husband and I were talking to each other. We said, well, let's do that. And we switched it. That very night, I was at a friend's house. I got into the passenger seat to go home, and I was pulling up my skirt to get it out of the way of the door. And at that moment, she slammed the door. And it would have taken my finger off if I hadn't had the ring there. The door bounced off of the ring. It took a little chip out of the ring, but it would have removed a finger if I hadn't switched it earlier that day. So I always think of that as a way that God took care of me. I'm very glad to have it on my right hand. That was it then. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I've really enjoyed this
Thank
time.
you. Really, it is amazing talk. Thank you for joining us. And as we mentioned before, we're going to email the recording to all of you by email, and we are going to post it. Actually, we're gonna post it on our Facebook. It's easier than to email it. If anyone would like to by email, request it from us. And please like our Facebook and share our Facebook. And this is the first time we're doing this virtual talk. We're gonna do more. More is coming, God willing. And please stay safe. And Father Don, do you wanna end up with a prayer, please? Father Don Shadid, can you please unmute him?
Is he there?
I think he dropped. I don't know.
No, he's there. I see him.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
here. Hang on.
There you are.
There you are, Father.
Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have a prayer. Thank you, Korea, and everybody, and let's pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Let us pray to the Lord. Lord, have mercy. O Heavenly Father, as we bow our heads before Thee, we thank Thee for the many blessings You have bestowed upon us, especially this opportunity to gather together and to learn from each other, and especially to hear the words and wisdom and love of Korea Frederica. We ask that You continue to open our hearts to each other, and most especially to Thy will, as we seek to serve Thee and glorify Thy name. We ask for these things in Thy name, and that You will watch over all of our faithful and all as we endure this pandemic. We thank Thee for the protection and the blessings that You offer to us day after day. We ask for these things in Thy name, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Christ is risen.
Indeed, He is risen.
Can I ask